Hello and welcome to Never a Truer Word, where we look at the words that people choose to use to see if they're telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And we're going to look at the words of Neil Gaiman, author, today. We're going to look at the words of someone who works with words. Will they be able to fool us, hoax us, or will we see that they are telling the truth? And telling the truth about what? Well, Neil Gaiman has faced a slew of allegations about his sexual conduct, allegations of abuse, inappropriate behaviour, acting without consent as well. He is facing a hell of a lot of it. It all started about 6 months ago with a podcast series making some really serious allegations, and then just when it looked like that had all died down, then there were more articles this week with fresh allegations. And Neil Gaiman has finally released a blog post detailing his side of things, or at least he hopes it details his side of things. He hopes it comes across as a denial. It's called Breaking the Silence. And what we're going to do here is look at what he has written, paragraph by paragraph, sentence by sentence, word by word, forensically investigate what it is that he says to see if we can believe what has been flagged by others as a denial. But what many people, and the reaction that I've mostly seen, has been, don't believe this at all. And I'm going to talk to you about that gut instinct. When you see something like that, many people have had the gut instinct of there's something off here. So we're going to examine the statement and we're going to see, is there something off in this denial? And what are we going to look at? Well, look, I'm going to look, and what a good denial is something that is specific, that's very, very specific. So, for example, if the allegation was put to someone, did you steal that money? And they go, I've never stolen anything in my life. That's not specifically denying stealing that money. So is he very specific about the denials? Does he own the denials as well? Plenty of use of the word I and talking about himself in that situation. And also, so often in denials, I see people play the victim and do the feel sorry for me. I'm actually the victim here. The victim isn't the people that are making the allegations. I'm the victim here. So we're going to look at Neil Gaiman's statement. Let's see what it reveals when we break it down word for word. And the statement begins, over the past many months, I have watched the stories circulating the internet about me with horror and dismay. I've stayed quiet until now, both out of respect for the people who were sharing their stories and out of a desire not to draw even more attention to a lot of misinformation. I've always tried to be a private person and felt increasingly that social media was the wrong place to talk about important personal matters. I've now reached the point where I feel that I should say something. The first thing that got me a little bit curious here was him talking about watching the stories. He says, I have watched the stories circulating the internet about me, not read the stories. Neil is an author, so I would expect him to be using wordy terms around reading and writing, and stories is certainly one of those words, but watching a story means that he hasn't just read the stories. I think what is more that he's been watching is this circulation. It's not just the fact that these allegations have been made that worries him, but it's the fact they've been circulating the internet. So he's been watching that circulation going on, and I don't think he likes the fact this has gained traction and this has got a lot of attention. And he talks about these stories circulating the internet. Now, this, I think, is not good. I think this is belittling the stories, because circulating the internet, that makes it sound like it's a few Facebook posts, could be anyone saying anything, it's not verified, it's not checked, it's not on the record, it's not someone putting their name to a story. They're just these little things, belittling things, little internet stories that are circulating the internet. Well, these are not stories circulating the internet. They are actual proper pieces of journalism. They've appeared in a podcast series that was remarkably detailed as it went along. And the same with the other stories which have appeared on respectable, credible websites, again, who fact check what they publish and who look at what it is that they are saying to say, can we really say this? Is this fair? Can we back this up? And instead, he's tried to belittle it just down to not these published stories on respectable media that have been well researched, but they're just stories circulating the internet. A little bit then of egotism there, circulating the internet about me. So he does not like the fact these stories are about him. Now, we wouldn't like the fact these stories were going around ourselves, but I think about me is really him bringing himself into the centre of this story. I think Neil is very much the centre of his world, as we will go on and see. And he says, I've stayed quiet until now, both out of respect for the people who were sharing their stories and out of a desire not to draw even more attention to a lot of information. Well, hey, what a nice guy he is. He stayed quiet. He hasn't defended himself. He hasn't said, nah, this is not true. This is nothing to do with me. I did not do this. Why? Because he has respect for those people who were sharing their stories. What a lovely guy he is. And by the way, look at how he's downplayed what's going on. So we see that he was belittling with circulating the internet. These are just people in general, not people you've known, people you have interacted with, people you've had relationships with. They are just people. Now they are downplayed to just general people, and they were sharing their stories in his world, not making really serious allegations, not telling stories that are frighteningly horrific. They were just sharing their stories. And he talks about not drawing even more attention to a lot of misinformation. Now, that's an interesting term because it's not total misinformation or drawing even more. I didn't want to draw attention to lies. It's just a lot of misinformation, which suggests that some of the information is not information. He didn't want to draw attention to a lot of misinformation. Well, that's the lot of misinformation is less conclusive than a lot of lies, a lot of untruths, a lot of falsehoods. It's just a lot of misinformation. But what is misinformation? It's really things that are maybe just a little bit skewed, a little bit off, downplaying what's been said again. He continues, I've always tried to be a private person, and that word tried is the one that sticks out for me there, because when we try something, that implies failure. Did you fix the car? I tried to. Well, you know then that the car is not fixed. You know that someone has tried to fix the car, but they have failed to fix the car. I'm going to try and run 100 meters in 15 seconds tomorrow. That means I haven't done it yet. I'm going to give it a go. So I've always tried to be a perfect person, suggests that he is not, a private person, not a perfect person. I've always tried to be a private person, suggests that he's not succeeded in being a private person. And I'm very interested in this because if as he says, I've always tried to be a perfect person, he then goes on to say, and felt increasingly that social media was the wrong place to talk about important personal matters. Why were you talking about important personal matters on social media to feel increasingly it was the wrong place to do it if you've tried to be a private person? Have you always tried to be a private person? Or are you trying to show us that you've said nothing because, hey, I'm trying to be a private person, and by the way, I don't think social media is the right place to do it? Now, what I'm going to see a lot here, and I might as well just come out and say it at the front, is that when he's trying to explain what he's done and explain who he is, I don't think he has the authentic language to back some of this up, which is why when we scrutinize it and when we examine it, it doesn't hang together. If you've always tried to be a private person, you would not have a thought about sharing important personal matters on social media because you were trying to be a private person. You would not do it. I think this is just bluster to say why he has been quiet for so long. I think why he's been quiet for so long is because he hoped it would die away, but he's watched the stories circulating. And then he finishes this paragraph with, I've reached the point where I feel that I should say something. Two very vague words at the end there. I feel that I should say something. I feel I should say something is not I'm going to say something at all. It's just I feel that I should say something. And that something, well, what is it that you're going to say? You do not say. Just say something is very vague. It sounds big. I'm going to say something. I'm going to say something. But no, he's just saying, I feel I should say something. So this is the first paragraph of his statement. Over the past many months, I have watched the stories circulating the internet about me with horror and dismay. I've stayed quiet until now, both out of respect for the people who were sharing their stories and out of a desire not to draw even more attention to a lot of misinformation. I've always tried to be a private person and felt increasingly that social media was the wrong place to talk about important personal issues. I've now reached the point where I feel that I should say something. Writing something. I'm sure Neil, as a writer, will tell me starting is often the hardest thing, and starting because you want to get it all out there. You want to get the important stuff out there at the start. And what do we have there? We have belittling stories. We have this whole thing about, hey, I'm a nice, thoughtful guy. I think about being a private person and social media is not quite right for me. And I didn't speak up. I didn't say anything to these allegations because I'm nice. Because I'm a nice guy and I wanted to be nice to these anonymous people, in his words, sharing their stories. The statement continues, as I read through this latest collection of accounts, there are moments I half recognise and moments I don't. Descriptions of things that happened sitting beside things that emphatically did not happen. I'm far from a perfect person, but I have never engaged in non-consensual sexual activity with anyone. Ever. So he says, as I read through this latest collection of accounts. So now he's reading, now he is actually looking at the thing that's made him say this, which is the latest collection of accounts, the latest allegations published, in other words. But he downplays it again to this latest collection of accounts, making it all sound small, isn't he? And also with that word collection, is he kind of getting that there's some collusion going on here? Or if they weren't collected, would they not be half as dangerous to him? Which I think, again, is the most recent stories that have come out, the most recent allegations that have been made that have forced him to come out. That's what his priority is. He thought he could ride the last ones just by ignoring them, but they keep on coming. This sentence here, as I read through the latest collection of accounts, there are moments I half recognise and moments I don't. So with there are there in the sentence, that says it's the present tense. So this is him talking as if he's doing it now. It's not as I read through this latest collection of accounts, there were moments I half recognised, which would be in the past. Notice he's writing this, he's also telling us at the same time in the present tense, as I read through this latest collection of accounts, there are moments I half recognise and moments I don't. It's a present tense statement, which is potentially there for drama. After all, he is a writer, so maybe he wants to go in the present tense to sound dramatic. Or maybe it's not true, because he hasn't read through the latest collection of accounts and seen things that he half recognises and things that he don't. There are moments I half recognise and moments I don't. Now that is just so strange. Do you not half recognise them? Do you fully recognise them? There are moments I half recognise and moments I don't. And when we half recognise something, and it's moments that he half recognises, what he is saying there implicitly is there's quite a lot of things that have been alleged that he recognises, that he does see have happened. And he says, these moments I half recognise and the moments I don't, descriptions of things that happened sitting beside things that emphatically did not happen. It's well overblown. It could be said a hell of a lot simpler, which is there are some things that are true, but there are some things that are not. There are some things in the stories that happened and some things that did not. But instead we get this, there are moments I half recognise and moments I don't, descriptions of things that happened sitting beside things that emphatically did not happen. And by the way, these things just did not happen. They emphatically did not happen. If something didn't happen, it didn't happen. The word emphatically is not needed there. It is only put in there to make it seem stronger, although it's not any stronger because it either did happen or it didn't happen. It emphatically did not happen because he has a need to persuade us that these things didn't happen. I said these things didn't happen because that's how we tend to talk with that contracted didn't. But he goes formal and says these things that emphatically did not happen. Now, I'm not saying this is a lie, but very often in lies, people think that by talking more formally, so instead of contracting did not to didn't, then by saying did not and it's formal, they will sound more impressive. They think they will sound more believable if they formally state things. So these things emphatically did not happen. He says, I'm far from a perfect person. Now, this is a very interesting one for me because, look, this guy is setting up a whole load of lying red flags for me. That is not to say that this is definitely a lie because he said I'm far from a perfect person, but let me explain why this sets off a red flag. Very often in unreliable denials, in denials that are not true, the person talking will admit to a smaller transgression than the big one that they are being accused of because they feel that will make them look honest and it will make them look like they're being open because their thought process is, if I admit to being flawed, if I admit to doing something wrong, just not the really bad thing that I did that I want to hide, but if I lead with honesty or what looks like honesty, but over a smaller thing, then folk will be slightly distracted and go, oh, look, he's admitting to that. Why would he admit to that if he isn't going to admit to the other thing? He must not have done it because he's an honest, truthful person. That's what happens very often. And that is what I'm seeing happening here when he says, I'm far from a perfect person. Is like, but look at me, how honest I am. Look, I'm so honest, I'm telling you, I'm not a perfect person. So that means that everything else around this must be true. Not necessarily the case. And he finishes this section with a very curiously worded phrase. I have never engaged in non-consensual sexual activity with anyone, ever. I'm really going to dig into this because he uses the exact same phrasing twice in this statement. I have never engaged in non-consensual sexual activity with anyone, ever. Let's break that down. Now, first of all, it includes the word never. I have never engaged in. Now, the word never is a red flag for deception. Again, it doesn't prove deception is happening. When someone tells you they never did anything, it does not mean they are telling a lie. What it does mean is dig into what they're saying because it may not be true. We see this quite a lot. Lance Armstrong is a very famous one who said that I've never taken performance-enhancing drugs. Well, he had. But the word never just seems to come out when people are telling falsehoods. Is that what's happening here? I have never engaged in non-consensual sexual activity with anyone, ever. And then ever at the end of it is not needed. It's another needless word that's been put in to persuade us because never means not ever. So you don't need the ever there. It's like almost like a double negative, never, ever. So that, again, is trying too hard to persuade us, trying very hard to persuade us. Then we have that really strange bit in the middle there, engaged in non-consensual sexual activity. Now, engaged is a word that is like, engaged suggests two people did it, but non-consensual sexual activity actually only takes one person to happen. So engaged in is weird. What does that all mean to him would be what I would say. Is this a strange get out that he has a personal definition of what non-consensual sexual activity means? Someone in the YouTube community mentioned that it reminded them of Bill Clinton's famous saying, I did not have sexual relations with that woman. And in Bill Clinton's words, he didn't actually have sex with her, he did sexual activity with her. So he could say and feel truthful saying, I didn't have sexual relations with that woman. He might have considered as well that he didn't have a relationship with her. They just had some sex play. So Bill Clinton could say that. He could say that with a straight face because by his personal definitions of what he'd come to convince himself of what was going on, he could say that and it was true. It wasn't a lie to him. And that's what this reminds me of as well. Engaged in non-consensual sexual activity with anyone, ever. What does that mean? What does non-consensual sexual activity really mean to Neil when he says that? More importantly, why hasn't he said it just a hell of a lot simpler? Why has he not just said, I've never sexually assaulted anyone, or I haven't sexually assaulted anyone? He didn't say any of those things. He says that really strange thing. Engaged in non-consensual sexual activity. By the way, he says he's never done it with anyone, which is general. It's not dealing with any of the specific allegations. He's not saying all these allegations, the people that have come forward, they're talking rubbish, it's lies. I'm going to deal directly with everything that these people have said, and these things did not happen. He just goes to a very, very general thing of, I've never engaged in non-consensual sexual activity with anyone, ever. It's very, very general. It does not specifically deny the allegations that have been made. Now, he does own it. And I talked about ownership being important in denials by saying, I have never engaged in these things. So he does own it with I. But look, where are the accusers in this statement? They're lost. The accusers, the people that are alleging that he did things to them, they are not in this part of the denial at all. The statement goes on from Neil. I went back to read the messages I exchanged with the woman around and following the occasions that have subsequently been reported as being abusive. These messages read now as they did when I received them, of two people enjoying entirely consensual sexual relationships and wanting to see one another again. At the time I was in those relationships, they seemed positive and happy on both sides. Once again, I think we've got some of that language which is going to prove problematic for Neil because it's not authentic. Look, he talks about reading the messages I exchanged with the woman. And then he says, these messages read now as they did when I received them. So the first time he's talking about messages I exchanged. That's a two-way conversation with people. But now he's only talking about the messages from the woman to him. These messages read now as they did when I received them, not when we wrote them or when we exchanged them. This is all from his point of view. This is about him receiving these messages. However, he did talk about exchanging messages with the woman. So is he hiding what he has said to them, or is he only dealing with what he has said to them in these messages? Or is this a bit of fantasy and that's why the language doesn't quite match up? He says these messages were exchanged around and following the occasions that have subsequently been reported as being abusive. Now, what does that mean? Around and following? Around, not when we were in these relationships, just around then. And following, what does following mean? 5 minutes after? Half an hour after? 2 days? 2 years? He doesn't say. Again, this is a personal definition. What does following mean to him? Literally, is he saying that, 5 minutes afterwards we got a message and everything was all right, but, after 2 hours she came to actually understand what had happened and sent some abusive messaging? But I'm only going to look at the ones that were following, in my words, like right after. But I'll notice that around and following does not include during. Around and following does not include during. Around could be before the event. Following is after the event. During events that were happening, he's not talked specifically about any messages he exchanged during those times. He says these messages read now as they did when I received them, of two people enjoying entirely consensual sexual relationships. These messages read now. So what he's talking there is about his interpretation. He's talking about what he reads when he sees them. Maybe if you or I saw them, we would see something different. But again, there's that slight difference there. We all know when someone is talking, whether they are happy, sad, upset, holding something back. So what he is saying is, I read them now and everything is absolutely fine. That's only his interpretation. He's not saying it's in black and white. He's not even sharing any of the messages, which may back up his point. What he is doing is putting a bit of distance there and saying, I read them now and I read them the exact same. That does not say there's nothing there to be seen. He talks of two people enjoying entirely consensual sexual relationships. Again, he could just say enjoying consensual sexual relationships, but there's this need to explain from him again. So they are not just people enjoying consensual sexual relationships, they're entirely enjoying them. He's got this need to use these words that are not needed to show how strong he believes these things to be, or to make his point stronger because he's worried that it will not be believed. He uses the phrase consensual sexual relationships again, by the way. I hope you noticed that. It's obviously something that he is clinging on to. It makes me think that he has a very specific definition of what a consensual sexual relationship is. He talks about these messages that he's got about how they read now, about how they are around and following the occasions that have subsequently been reported as being abusive. What he doesn't mention is how these relationships ended and any conversations that were had around the end of the relationship. Now, I'm assuming they ended. Did everything end on great terms? Did everything really just end like, yeah, everything is fine? That's why I think he's been around and following. I think that there may well be messages he's not talking about here. I'm not saying he's lying. I'm saying he's not being fully frank here around how these messages end. Neil says, at the time I was in those relationships, they seemed positive and happy on both sides. So what he is saying there is not that he feels that now, not that they are positive and happy to him now, or his perception of them now is that they were positive and happy. He's only being very limited there and saying at the time he was in those relationships, they seemed positive and happy on both sides. And look at that word, seemed. It's not were. At the time I was in those relationships, they were positive and happy. No, they only seemed positive and happy. I think an acknowledgement from him there that at the time things were a little bit different in his head and he can see things a little bit more clearly now. But he never really explicitly says that about these allegations of abuse. He steers well clear of that. But if we dig into his language, we can see that he now has a different perspective on what went on. And once more, we've got this inauthentic language that doesn't just hang together, because what he's saying is right now these messages read now, that's this present moment in time, as they did when I received them. But then there is that indication that at the time everything seemed positive and happy, but he realizes now that things weren't positive and happy. But he also tells us that, well, when I read the messages now, everything seemed positive and happy. Doesn't hang together. The other thing I've noticed in this is that he still has the messages, or still claims to have the messages, because otherwise, how did he go back to read them? These allegations go back quite a long way. Interesting that the guy has kept the messages from then. We'll take a break from the statement right now, but we will be back to look at Neil telling us more of how he's trying to better himself as a person as his statement continues. If you're interested in this, then you might like a playlist I've put together on YouTube looking at people making apologies and denials. And are they genuine apologies? Are they real denials? Are they reliable denials? You can find that playlist on YouTube. It's called Apologies and Denials. If you want more like this, then do hit the subscribe or follow buttons. That means you will get the new episodes as soon as they arrive. You can become a member of the channel on YouTube or a subscriber on Spotify. You will get episodes like this as soon as they are released, before everyone else. And you'll also get exclusive episodes regularly as well. So that's become a channel member on YouTube or a subscriber on Spotify. And if you want to do none of those things, then you are the marketing person for this channel. So press the like button. That helps this get out to many more people. Share with your network. Lots of people interested in this story and lots of people wanting to know, are denials real? My gut feeling says this is a bit hokey, but how can I decipher this and know whether my gut is like a little bit off or whether I should trust my gut instinct? Share with people who would be interested. I'm also interested in your comments as well, so please do comment. Let me know what you think of Neil Gaiman's denial. We continue, and the statement continues from Neil. He says, and I also realise, looking through them years later, that I could have and should have done so much better. So this is him talking about the messages. I was emotionally unavailable while being sexually available, self-focused and not as thoughtful as I could or should have been. I was obviously careless with people's hearts and feelings, and that's something that I really deeply regret. It was selfish of me. I was caught up in my own story and I ignored other people's. So this is just more of the vibe of I'm not perfect. And I spoke about why that could be a tactic that he is using here. Look, I'm not perfect. I'm being very honest about my flaws, so I must therefore be honest about everything else. He talks about being careless with people's hearts and feelings. Now, this is talking about romance more than anything particularly sexual when you talk about hearts and feelings. But is he also trying to get across that maybe, hey, I hurt some people. You know how it is. Chicks get, upset when you hurt them and then they'll go a bit crazy and make allegations. Is that what he's going to there? Because what I think that could be is, look, I didn't assault anyone. I didn't sexually abuse anyone, but I might have been careless with their hearts and feelings. And you know what women are like when you hurt their feelings. Very possible that is what the guy's doing. He talks about, I was emotionally unavailable while being sexually available. Now that sounds one way. It's as if he's saying, I was available, I wasn't doing anything, I wasn't out there making the moves, but, I was sexually available, so if someone wanted to come and get me, they could. It's very, very one way. And again, while not going really big into victim blaming, there's all these subtle little things happening suggesting that this was not his fault. He was a bit of a flawed person, acted in some flawed ways. People took advantage of him. He wasn't the nicest person, but really, it's really not his fault. He was a bit flawed and women took a bit of an advantage of him, and sometimes he was a bit rubbish to them. It's very, very one way. And he talks about being careless with people's hearts and feelings and saying that is something that I really deeply regret. Need to persuade here again. He doesn't just regret it. He really regrets it. He deeply regrets it. In fact, he really deeply regrets it. Trying too hard again, in my opinion, to persuade us of what is going on. He really deeply regrets it. And then finally, we've got some more of this author stuff of I was caught up in my own story. Who talks like that? Authors talk like that. The statement continues, I've spent some months now taking a long, hard look at who I have been and how I made people feel. I've starts that extract. I've spent some months now taking a long, hard look at who I have been and how I have made people feel. Now, that's in the past tense. Now, this is good. Because what he's saying is he's busy spending some months. Because it's in the past tense, it's not in the present tense. We're going to see a lot of what he says is future focused about how he's going to be a better person. But it does say that he has been taking a long, hard look at how he has made people feel and how he has behaved. I believe that. Also, notice he uses a contraction there. He's not being formal and saying that I have. He's using the past tense, contracted, I've. So he can use contractions if he wants to. He says he spent some months now taking that long, hard look, which is interesting because he talks about the allegations and reading about them at the very beginning of the statement over the past many months. So what I am getting from this is that it is the allegations coming out that have made him take a long, hard look at who he is, because both times he has talked about that being the period of months. What's interesting, disappointing, is he talks about who I have been and how I have made people feel. So once again, he is talking about people here. The accusers are nowhere in this statement, really, and certainly in this part of it, it's just people. I mean, that could be anyone. It could be workmates. It could be family. It could be women he's had relationships with. It's just people in general. So it's not, again, specifically dealing with how he has made the woman that have made these allegations feel. It's just people in general. And looking at how I have made people feel, well, how does he know? Because when he talks about those text messages, he says, these messages read now as they did when I received them. Two people, again, people enjoying entirely consensual sexual relationships and wanting to see each other again. So what has changed your perception? Because you've said over months, you've looked at how you've made people feel, but then you said that just now when you've read the text messages, they read to you as if it was two people just having a good time. More from the statement. Neil says, like most of us, I'm learning and I'm trying to do the work needed, and I know that's not an overnight process. I hope that with the help of good people, I'll continue to grow. I understand that not everyone will believe me or even care what I say, but I'll be doing the work anyway for myself, my family, and the people I love. I will be doing my very best to deserve their trust as well as the trust of my readers. So this starts with just a classic, like most of us, I'm learning. So this is him trying to say, I'm just like you. I'm just like most people in this world. I'm learning. I'm not some monster that I've been made out to be in all these allegations. I'm just like you. Look, have a think. Are you learning as well? And we go, yeah, I'm learning. Right now, see, we're all the same. I'm not a bad person. I'm just like most of us. And he keeps going on in this section, looking at how he is connected to other people. So he wants the help of good people. He realizes not everyone will believe me. This is kind of like, yeah, look at me. I'm in the real world. I know not everyone is going to believe me, and I'm going to be honest. I'm not trying to get everyone to believe me. I just want to say my piece. I don't really care if you believe me or not. My family, the people I love, these are the people that I'm doing it for, and the trust of my readers. Where's the accusers in all of that, Neil? You're starting to make me a little bit angry now here by not mentioning these people that have come into your life and have had, in some of the things you say, you realize you've made them feel a certain way. But no, you're not learning. You're not trying to improve for the accusers. You're not trying to avoid anyone else landing in the same place as these accusers have, even if nothing happened that was illegal or inconsensual or anything like that. People came away with a bad experience, but no. You have completely forgotten these accusers. And we also have the word trying in there. I'm trying to do the work needed. So has he not done the work needed? Because trying, as I've said before, implies failure. So he's trying to do the work needed. And then we've just got all this wish. I hope that with the help of good people, I'll continue to grow. And I'll be doing my very best. So, yeah, I don't think Is he trying very hard? Is he working very hard? I do not get that sense from this slightly vague, wishing language that we've got going here. It's not really that convincing to me, Neil. And finally, he says getting the trust of his readers. And I did wonder if that is one of the true cruxes of all this, which is about not letting the fans down, not letting the money dry up. Could be. Also, just to finish this one off, he says, I'll be doing the work anyway, which is in the future. So really, none of this has been going on for months. He's maybe been doing some thinking for months and thinking, maybe this will all go away. But oh my God, now it's not going away. So now that this is proved to it's not going away, I will be doing the work in the future. So while he wants to give us the impression that he's been really introspective for ages, the language is not there to back it up, because he read the text messages and thought they still read as if there's nothing wrong, and I'll be doing the work anyway, but I'll be doing the work anyway. That means that work is in the future. The statement goes on, at the same time as I reflect on my past and as I review everything that actually happened as opposed to what is being alleged, I don't accept there was any abuse. To repeat, I have never engaged in non-consensual sexual activity with anyone. At the same time as I reflect on my past and as I review everything that actually happened. That, again, doesn't sound like someone doing the work or admitting that there was some things wrong in the past, even though he's tried to say I'm flawed and, I was careless with people's hearts and feelings. As I reflect on my past and as I review everything that has actually happened, we do have a denial here. Or do we? I don't accept there was any abuse. Very different to there was no abuse. It's I don't accept there was any abuse. So that here, I think we're seeing that what's going on is not black and white in his head. He just doesn't accept there was ever any abuse. That is, he can't be talked into it, which suggests that he could be talked into it, or he has the concept of being talked into it in there. It's just, I don't accept there was any abuse. It's not there wasn't any abuse. And by the way, we've got I don't. They're not I do not, I don't. So he does write in contracted works. It's not I do not accept there was any abuse. It's I don't accept there was any abuse. And then he says, to repeat, I have never engaged in non-consensual sexual activity with anyone. Now, to repeat is interesting. Very often liars, and look, I'm not saying this proves he's a liar once more. This is just indications that are coming up, and there's a lot of them, as I think you can see. To repeat is something that liars do because they want to convince you of their lie. So they will tell you things more times than someone telling you the truth would, frankly. We're not taught how to lie, so we think the more often we repeat the lie, two things. Number one, the more likely it is to be believed, because I've said it so many times, it must be true. And also, we think that the more we say it, the more chance there is of someone hearing it, especially if they're not quite listening. So what I find that liars will often do is use a phrase like to repeat, or as I've said before, or I've said it before and I'll say it again, or as I keep saying, because they think that makes their lie more credible. Is that what's happening here? Could be. To repeat, and then we have the exact same phrase again. I have never engaged in non-consensual sexual activity with anyone. Here it is from the very beginning there. I have never engaged in non-consensual sexual activity with anyone ever is at the beginning. It's the exact same form of words. It's almost like I'm going to stick to this very strict definition that I have set for myself. It's very curious that in all the denials that are not coming thick and fast in this statement, I'll be honest with you, Neil, but in all the denials that do come, 2 of them have the exact same form of wording. Here's some more from Neil. Some of the horrible stories now being told simply never happened, while others have been so distorted from what actually took place that they bear no relationship to reality. I am prepared to take responsibility for any missteps I made. I'm not willing to turn my back on the truth, and I can't accept being described as someone I am not and cannot and will not admit to doing things I didn't do. So this starts off by saying some of the horrible stories now being told simply never happened, while others have been so distorted from what actually took place they bear no relationship to reality. What are you saying there? What you are saying, some of the horrible stories simply never happened. That means that others may well have happened. They simply never happened, by the way. It's not that they never happened. Again, this need to persuade by putting these extra words in that are not needed to enhance our understanding of what it is he's saying, that are put in there to persuade us. So these stories simply never happened. Others have been so distorted from what actually took place. What does distorted mean? Well, distorted means you take the truth and then it looks a little bit different, but the distortion starts with a truth, with something that actually happened. And what he's saying is it's been distorted. So there's a kernel of the original thing at the beginning there is what he's saying. So this is not really saying none of this happened at all. This is saying, it's a very, very wordy way of saying 2 sides to every story. Heard that before. I did not like this bit one bit. He says, I am prepared to take responsibility for any missteps I made. This is an extremely weak part of the statement. It's not I am taking responsibility. It's I'm prepared to take responsibility. So I will, if need be. Doesn't mean I'm doing it right now, but I am prepared to take responsibility. And by the way, it's for any missteps I made, not for the missteps I made, not for the things I did wrong. It's just if there are any, then I'm prepared to take responsibility for them. It's extremely weak. It's extremely, extremely thin. We've seen before when people apologize for things and say we apologize for any offense caused, not for the offense we caused or for doing the wrong thing. It's just we apologize for any offense caused. And this is I am prepared to take responsibility for any missteps I made. This is not someone taking any responsibility right now in the moment at all, because they're prepared to do it at some point in the future, but only if there are any missteps. And by the way, the allegations that have been made against you are absolutely horrendous. They are not missteps. And then he says, I'm not willing to turn my back on the truth, and I can't accept being described as someone I am not and cannot and will not admit to doing things I didn't do. That is general. That is not specific. So in this whole statement, and this is the very last thing in the statement, it's I cannot and will not admit to doing things I didn't do, but it's not dealing at all with the allegations that have been put to him. This could be about burning his tea as his supper as he was cooking it. I cannot and will not admit to doing things I did not do. It's not at all specific towards the allegations. It's all in the general. It's very, very weak. I'm going to look at the whole statement now and the composition of the statement, because I came away from that thinking I heard a lot about him and his flaws. I heard very little about the allegations and denial of the allegations, and I broke it down. And what I can see when I look at that is that it's about a 500-word statement, and there are only 2 very short passages where he talks about the allegations and makes denials of the allegations. The rest of the time, he talks about him, what he's been going through now, what he's been going through in life, and what he will do in the future. 80% of that statement is about him, and only 20% of that statement is about the allegations that he said he was breaking his silence to talk about. And that is a statement, and as I think you can see, I'm just not a huge fan. I found it really self-serving. The 80% of that statement that was about him, that was about trying to get people on his side, it was about trying to get people to feel sorry for him. It wasn't so much about saying, I didn't do this. There is no truth in this whatsoever. The denial he made, that curiously worded statement, that's so curiously worded, I don't have it in front of me and I cannot get it out of my head right now. I can't say it, I can't remember the words. I think it means something to him that might mean something different to other people when they read it. Did not like the fact that he attempted to belittle the allegations. I did not like the fact that the victims, the alleged victims, disappeared, and he just talked about people in general within it at all. You just made the people that are at the centre of this about that high in his statement, very, very small. When he's talking about this honesty thing, and I'm a flawed person, and here's all the work that I plan to do, I could pick so many holes in that, and the words in that, and the way he phrased it, that I do not think that is the authentic experience that he has. And the denials, the bits that really were in there saying, I didn't do this, when you look at the word choice within them, they are wafer thin. What do you think? Let me know in the comments if you can, if they're available on this platform. If not, you can get in touch on social media. You will find all the links for that at neveratruerword.com. You'll also find many more videos, podcasts as well, and also you can sign up for the monthly newsletter where we discuss how to find deception in people's statements, including statements like that one from Neil. Neveratruerword.com is the website address, and we'll see you soon for something new from Never a Truer Word.